This is a simple wet fly attractor from Fling and Puterbaugh's book, The Basic Manual of Fly Tying. It imitates pupa or emergers. It's a basic wet fly or soft hackle pattern. I'm tying it with black thread on a number 14 hook. They just call for a standard hook, wet fly hook. I will be using fibers off of this soft hackle hen feather for the tail. I will be using peacock herl, 2 strands of peacock herl for the body, and another feather off of that same hide. It's a hen soft hackle hide for the front hackle. So I'm only tying in a little bit of thread on at the front of the hook, and then grabbing a bunch of fibers off that longer, heavier feather. I'm going to put a tail in about hook shank length, and if I hold my feather fibers on the front side of the hook shank, that keeps them on top of the hook shank when the thread drags them backwards. So I'm going to wrap those back to about where the barb used to be. I've smashed the barb out of this hook, and then I'll clip off the butt ends of those fibers, bring my thread back up to the tie-in point, and I'm going to tie in the peacock herl there. And I have 3 different ways of tying in peacock herl, and I'll show each of those here. So the first one, I'm just wrapping back over the herl to that tail, and then just keep my thread about halfway up the shank, a little bit less. Take those 2, kind of try to stack them together and just wrap them together. So this is a very basic way to wrap a herl body, and there's nothing fancy about it except that it does create a nice cylindrical body. And the problem with a herl wrapped body like this one is that there's nothing reinforcing the herl. And so it is fairly delicate as a body, but it does look pretty with that nice cylindrical full wrap on the hook shank. So that's one way to do that, and I'll go ahead and tie that off and show a couple other ways to wrap that herl body that make it a little bit stronger. A second way to wrap the herl begins before you even start tying. You have to make the decision, because you're going to keep the tag end of your tie-in thread and not clip that off. So then the tail gets tied in, and you've got that thread hanging out back there to be in your way. I try to keep those fibers on top of the hook shank by having them in front. Clip out the butt ends. And again, tie in the 2 strands of peacock herl. Wrapping that back to the tail. And as in the first way, I'm going to keep my thread here, kind of keeping the thread close to the tail helps keep those peacock herl strands from separating too much, and then you just push the thread out as you wrap forward. Tie those off up here where I'm going to tie in the front hackle, and you see that I have, again, that nice cylindrical full body. This isn't a tractor fly, which is why I'm sure the instructions call for the peacock herl body. Gives it that flash on the body. Now, in order to strengthen that herl body, you take the tag of the thread and counter wrap it. Let's see, I'll do just one counter wrap right behind it, and then I'm going to just try to weave it through the fibers without laying the fibers down too much. But counter wrap that thread through the herl, and it's, you are sacrificing some of that fullness in the wrap by doing this, but you are also creating a much stronger herl body. It's got that thread wrap over it so that it's a little more durable, and then clip out that thread tag at that point, and then tie in the front hackle. The third way of tying in the herl, again I have two fibers, two herls I guess, and I'm going to wrap those in on the top of the hook shank, taking my wraps back to the tail. Now I'm going to create a rope. So to do that, I'll just bring my herl back and create a dubbing loop. So pull out my thread, do a half in it, bring it up and wrap it in again, and then if I take that loop and wind it around my thread once, and it's going to hold it in place better, and then I can just take that out to the front of the hook, or where I'm going to tie in the hackle. Now I'm going to take these two herl and bring them down along my thread, and I'm going to catch in the thread and the herl together with my hackle pliers, and I'm going to twist them clockwise. And this is what we call a herl rope. So the two thread strands are twisted in together with the herl. I'm going to just let that hang for a minute. I'm going to have to re-twist it. I should have done this first. I want to put a half hitch in my thread up here behind the hook eye. That way I can actually twist this onto, or wrap this onto the hook shank with the rotary device. So hold that up above the shank, and then I'll use the shank or the rotary device to wrap the herl around the body. And I'm not getting as nice of a cylinder as when I don't have the thread in it, but I think it's a better cylinder than when I wrap that single strand of thread through the body. So that's a third way, and this I guess would be probably my preferred way, unless I'm just tying for show and I want that really pretty body on my fly. then I would probably do the Hurl rope rather than the single fiber or single thread counter wrapped like a rib over it. For the front hackle, I have another feather off of this hide. This is a hen soft hackle. What I have done is followed the instructions from Fling and Pewter Bah to tie this in. I've actually clipped out the fluffy butt end of the feather and then clipped a few fibers off that tip, that butt end, to make a good tie-in point. What I've found with this particular feather is that the tips are very easily broken. And so if I tie it in by the butt, or it's actually about halfway up the feather, but I've clipped off all the bottom end of that feather, then take my hackle pliers and grab the tip of the feather. And it's a fairly sparse hackle, as soft hackles generally are. So then I can just do a couple wraps hanging on to the tip. That's probably plenty. And then tie that off. I get the kind of hackle that I want, then I can just grab everything and pull it back and wrap the head in. And then I can find that tip, and because it's really tender, it just snaps right out, and I don't have to worry about clipping it. Looks like I one more there that I want to pull out. Maybe. I can tip that back up in there. Okay, and then I'll put a whip finish on it. I'll use some thin UV on the head to lock in the knots. Any head cement, of course, would work. So this is a simple wet fly attractor, and it would imitate a pupil stage or an emerger. And I did get a little bit of glue in my eye, so just poke up from the bottom and knock that out of there and give me a clean eye.